has internal conflict within the Sikh community made the topic of Khalistan difficult to cover for media? Again, has internal conflict within the Sikh community made the topic of Khalistan difficult to cover for media? Now, Dr Gurnam Singh, I'll start with yourself. You've touched upon this quite a few times already. How do you think your own experiences translate to the media, who, let's just say you've got your average journalist from The Independent, for example? How do you think they would find the difficulties you faced in terms of getting a position on Khalistan from someone?
Well, I mean, it is a big challenge. I mean, let's take somebody who writes a lot about Sikh issues, Sunny Hundal, yeah? Mm-hmm. And I regularly kind of have dialogue with Sunny. You know, he's always open to a dialogue, but if we can't convince Sunny Hundal to, you know, offer a more of a pro-Sikh perspective, then, you know, we've got a lot of work to do. And he's, you know, from within our community, although others might argue that he's kind of got a different perspective. But I just want to give 3 concrete examples. Absolutely, divisions within our community have had a damaging effect. Now, I'll give you 3 concrete examples. If we go back to 2014, where we're commemorating the 30th anniversary of the attack on the Bassey. And if you remember, up to that point, the movement, certainly in the UK, to some extent, was waning. And that was evidenced in the fact that the 1984 demonstration that they have out in Hyde Park was, you know, diminishing dramatically. But we had the media, we promoted that big time, and we had 30,000 plus people in the Hyde Park demonstration, which was a powerful kind of demonstration that the Sikhs are still fighting for the cause. But what happened at the same time at the Akaal Channel on the 30th anniversary? We had Sikhs fighting Sikhs, sword wielding, fighting, and those images were all over the media. And even I was ashamed to see that image. And you can have all kind of conspiracy theories about maybe it was the Indian government or Badal or whatever, but the spectacle of having Sikhs on the 30th anniversary fighting Sikhs did immense damage, and that was seen as evident. Now, if we, that same year, I actually did a debate in the Birmingham Town Hall, and we had all the Khalistani Jathebandis there, and we debated Khalistan. And a question was put, is Khalistan, and I know that you don't like this terminology, is it a secular state in the sense that, because often Maharaja Jasjit Singh is invoked as a secular ruler, and somehow that Sikh Raj is a starting point to define our own Raj. Or is it a theocratic state? Will it be Amritdhari Sikhs who will run this state? Will it only be Amritdharis who can actually have power and governance? Or can anybody, in fact the question was, could a Hindu become a Prime Minister of Khalistan?
And those are questions we're not going to try and answer now.
But I want to tell you the response. Yeah. So half the Khalistanis in the room said no, and half of them said yes. And then there was a huge row about that. So what I'm saying is that we have divisions in terms of how we conceptualize this, and maybe that they could be healthy, but we tend not to debate them. We have divisions on the ground. One last example, when Mr. Modi came to this country, Sikhs were falling over each other to meet him. In fact, the only person who refused to have at that meeting was me. They put my name forward and said, no, we're not going to have him. So I feel proud that I wasn't invited to that meeting. Yet there was the dossier at the same time. So you had a dossier, and Gurnam Singh, Secretary General of the Sikh Council of UK, was there. And he praised Modi for his speech at Wembley Stadium, where Modi talked about the great Sikhs and things like that. So, we have these differences in our community, and often that does create a lot of kind of damage to the kind of...
I just want to bring that question to Jasmine then. Do you perhaps feel that with there being this internal conflict that a lot of people kind of have experienced, do you feel this is easier for media to focus on rather than the issue itself, given your experiences of reading news on Khalistan and also your own recent experience being on the Asian network? So is it easier for media to focus on that internal conflict rather than the issue itself?
Yeah, I definitely agree with your statement that the media kind of focus on the internal conflict and the emotional side that the whole Khalistan subject creates within the Sikh community, and instead of focusing upon Khalistan itself, and then they nitpick, and then they just report on that's their catalyst for creating even more negative bias regarding Khalistan in the media. And on Friday I had the unpleasant experience of dealing with good old Nihal again.
Although I will add a caveat, the BBC Asia Network are one of the few organisations that do allow this topic to be discussed in the public sphere, and they have a relationship with the Sikh Press Association that is very interactive, and they are interested, for whatever reasons, you guys can make your own assumptions about that, but they are very interested in covering Sikh topics regularly, which the Sikh Press Association, I have to say, we're grateful for, because we don't have a platform of that scale anywhere else. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, like I said, interacting with Nihal, he is one of those type of journalists that the whole object of appearing on that radio interview was to talk about this event and media coverage of Khalistan itself. But then he began talking about like divides within the Sikh community and like philosophical questions and ideological questions and things like that. And I feel like when journalists and the media delve into something like that, they're just trying to provoke a reaction to satisfy, I don't know, readership and things like that, and I think that's quite disgusting.
I'm going to bring up two comments we got on a question we had in our questionnaire from the media professionals that answered back before looking for Dr Jasjit Singh to give me some input on this. One of these was that the question, was, are Khalistanis presenting their views to the media in an articulate and open fashion? 46% said no, so 13% said sometimes. But comments we got on this specifically said, one, that Khalistanis can often be hot-headed and biased. But on the opposite end of the scale, we also had a comment from a journalist saying that most Sikhs are simply afraid to touch the topic. So on both ends of the spectrum, there seems to be some sort of issue. Dr. Jasjit Singh, in your kind of view, what would you think? How do Sikhs need to find a middle ground? And if they need to, how do they do so?
I think firstly, Sikhs need to be a lot more forgiving regarding their representatives. It's an added pressure as a minority representing a whole community on national radio, which a majority person wouldn't have. And I've been asked by the BBC, they've got my number now, I've been asked to supply Sikhs to them in various kind of categories. And a lot of people aren't willing to come on because they know that if they say something wrong, then somebody will jump down their throat. We're not all experts. Everyone's at different. That's the point, isn't it? We're all at different levels. So, if somebody's brave enough to go out there and give it a go, then fair enough. You can talk about what you liked or didn't like about what they said offline later on. That's all good. But, the way I see it, there's not many of us anyway. So if somebody's brave enough to go out there, then we need to kind of, obviously, don't say anything and everything. We're all experienced enough to have seen really bad interviews, of course. So I'm not saying that anybody should jump on, but for those that know a little bit what they're talking about, maybe be a bit more forgiving.
Regarding the comments, so hot-headed and biased.
See, a lot of that again. Where do those perceptions come from? And I'd suggest it goes back to question number 2 and some of the photographs that are often used when certain events take place, when certain protests take. It's all wasn't there an article on the BBC about one guy who's in every single every single you know what I mean? There's one guy who's in every single.
Perhaps
protest.
something interesting for the audience to do would actually be maybe Google Khalistani and look at the images that come up and make up for your own mind. How the portrayal in general. But the other comment then, so most Sikhs are afraid to touch the topic, Dr. Jasjit Singh. In your opinion, what do you think about that?
Again, it goes back to what I said. It's because do we allow people to express their opinion? They can do, but I know people who told me about kickbacks on things they've said before. So let it get out in the open. Let people express their opinion and deal with the argument, not the individual.
Shamsher Singh, has an aggressive stance on Khalistan pushed away larger community support based on that the thought that most Sikhs are afraid to touch the topic?
I don't think I think firstly, I think a community that's gone through genocide and has lived through the state suppression and state terror. In the JG writes in his book, The Politics of Genocide, that between 1984 and 1995, 1 million Sikh youth went missing or were killed. This has been well documented by human rights organizations. So the amount of state terror that we were subjected to as a community, it's understandable that there's apprehension when engaging with authorities or speaking about these kind of issues. I think we've internalized a lot of that fear, coming as a second generation Khalistani, a parent who was involved in the Khalistan Sangharsh, who was part of an ex-militant for Jathebandi. I think there's an internalization of that fear of state terror, that we don't want to speak openly about Khalistan because we'll be labeled as terrorists and as extremists, and we don't have the ability to kind of articulate a position in response to that. There's a lot of kind of talk here about being rational and being well-reasoned and being logical and kind of stepping into this constructed arena of like modernity and English as a language and being able to present our argument without any emotion. And I think that's completely unfair, completely unrealistic. I think as a community there is, but our language, Punjabi is an incredibly emotional language. When we speak in Punjabi, the expression, the mode of expression is completely different. And when we're forced to have a conversation in English, I think it's unnecessary conditions are imposed. Like as an individual, I'm supposed to not feel any pain or anger or rage that my voice, our community's voice, has been silenced through state terror, and I think it's indicative of the whole kind of setup. There's a shifting outside of Sikhi, outside of Gurmat, where Sant Jarnail Singh and Sikhs were, our Jathebandiyan are, where the Khalistan Sangharsh exists, with a closeness to Guru Granth, to Guru Panth, to Sikhi, and there's a shifting away from that. And how does that shifting occur? Authority and social organization is being located outside of Guru Granth Sahib, where we call Guru Granth Sahib Sache Badshah, is a political, religious, all of our kind of definition of being comes from there. And when we go into the modern quote-unquote world, authority is now coming from the state, it's coming from the media. Why does the media want us to be rational? Why does the media, if we're really well behaved, this is what I hear when the media says stuff, when I hear stuff like that, if we're really well behaved, then maybe we'll be given an opportunity to kind of speak on this. I think it's deeply insulting, and I think when media kind of talks about this, we are very rational and we're very logical, and I think there is a lot of anger in the community, and I think the question is, why does that anger exist? Because the last time we saw that kind of anger, an entire generation of Sikhs from Punjab picked up weapons in order to fight against a country they no longer saw as their own. So what does that anger lead to, and why is that anger existing, and why is it that we're so passionate about this, and why is it that our voice isn't being heard, and why are we forced to speak along constructed terms and to kind of contort and fit in? Like, if I wear a suit, will I be more like seen as a nicer person? If I wear a triangle turban, if I put a suit and tie on it, will I be seen as more rational, as more liberal, as more intelligent, as more articulate? If I wear a t-shirt with Khalistan Zindabad on there, am I immediately perceived as irrational religious extremist? And I think those questions need to be asked to the media.
I'll go to you in just 1 second, but I just want to be slightly more specific then. But do you think there's a job to be done then from Khalistani supporters to bring more Sikhs into the topic, given that we got comments such as most Sikhs are afraid to touch the topic?
I think there needs to be more understanding of a movement before any critique or any conversation takes place around it, and I'm really glad that this event isn't about talking about Khalistan, even though some of the panelists have made a lot of commentary about Sikhi, about theocracy, about socialism, about liberalism and all the rest of it. I think we need to fully understand a movement, a liberation movement of a people. We need to understand the lived realities of those people that exist today. This is a living movement, a living, breathing Sangharsh. And we need to be sympathetic to the environment within which such aggressive, militant and extremist response occurs against state violence and state terror. I think we need to understand movements before we assume to critique them.
I 100%.
Amardeep. Sorry.
Just on this whole, again, it's this repeated narrative of us and them, as if the media is an enemy to be overcome.
It is, though, I'm afraid.
Well, that's another point, but
I agree with you on that.
Yeah,
there is some of that perception of us and
but
them.
when you talk about, if the media don't understand us, then I'm just going to turn my back on the media. I find that slightly immature in that, well, you know, it's my ball, I'm going to take it away if you don't play my rules kind of thing. It's for you
I
to
think
be...
that's a simplistic
it's for
way
you
of
to
that
be,
argument, though. I haven't heard that said on this table yet.
well, in a manner of speaking, it's kind of, you know, you've kind of alluded to the fact that, well, I don't fit into that model, therefore I'm going to turn my back on it.
But I'm still here on the panel speaking.
Yeah, which is very good, which is excellent, which is, you know,
I
that is the way it should be.
I think what Shamsher is trying to say is he's not going to like mould himself into something that he isn't in order for the media to try and understand him.
That's where the professionionality and understanding the media comes in. It's for you to act smart and play by the media's games.
The media's job. If
you want
to
something
be a
from the
success-
media.
Yes.
So you're in a position where you're asking for something. It's not the media asking you for something.
No,
You're
but if the
asking
media want to be professional and do their jobs, they need to also put in the effort and research themselves as well.
Which they will, but you can't be turning your back because you don't like the rules.
So we don't want to keep
You've got to be
back and
smart.
forth. We don't want to keep...
You've got to play the game.
Really briefly on the kind of arena that we exist in. It's this modern liberal secular democratic arena. It's capitalist that exists within the industrialized world, and order is established as the highest order, and that's our proximity as Sikhs to Christianity. And when we interpret it, it's as the lenses, or how close are we to whiteness, how close are we to Christianity. When Sikhis talked about, well, how is it understood with Christianity as the apex? When we're talking about Khalistan as a nation, the European nations are the apex, and when we're talking about that, well, how close are we to those? So when we're talking about conforming, this arena is violent to all of the global south, not just to Sikhs, to anybody that is black and brown, that anybody that isn't white. We have to always fight for our expression in this arena.
There is a problem with this.
Zidane.
No, I just want to, there is a problem with this argument. You can't then make the argument that the whole world doesn't understand you because
I'm not saying that.
Because it's English and this, that, and the other.
I'm not saying
and
that.
then fight for a nation state, which is a very modern concept.
Yeah, I'm not saying that either.
Unless we've got a different concept of what a nation state
I
is.
think
The
let's wait
concept
one second. Sorry, I just want to bring it together and go back to Amardeep Bassey. So, is there a way that media would be more open, perhaps? And I don't want to just put it on that they're not already more open. So this is just playing scenarios. Just 1 second. For someone that might actually be open in their belief that. I believe that the AK-47 symbolism, for example, which has been kind of heavily criticized in public affairs, that they could be open about saying, this is my symbol of my support for Khalistan. Do you think that media could ever adapt to relate to that in a friendly and open way as well?
Like I said earlier, there's a real myth around the media. It's this dark machine that spins its own webs, and you know we've got to be fearful of it. It's not quite the case. You know, as journalists, we are human beings. It's not my job as a journalist to know everything, but it's my job as a journalist to know where to find out everything. I need to have these sources of information. Now, you can run the narrative here. It's not very complicated. You pick a journalist. You know, that's one thing in itself. If you wanted a story of Khalistan, who would you go to? The political reporter, the religious reporter, the education reporter?
We will actually be publishing those details and on our questionnaire as well. So we did ask that question.
Those are the kind of basics you need to... I mean, it's simply, you talk to him. It's a two-way... You know, there's no wicked journalist out there saying, I can't wait to trip this guy up. For a journalist, he's looking for a story. That's his bread and butter. That's how he gets promotion. That's how he gets paid. He's just looking for stories. He doesn't invest any emotion in it. You know, he won't give two hoots whether you make Khalistan or not. His job is to present the argument.
Would you respond to like Noam Chomsky when he kind of says that corporate media exists to further the agenda and the interests of dominant so-called elite groups?
I'm a big fan of Noam Chomsky, and in a wider sense, he is right. I agree with that. Media is controlled, state controlled, there is an agenda. But on a day-to-day basis of journalist, human being, subject and interviewer, there is leeway for that bigger bias to be bypassed. You know, the editor isn't going to nitpick on everything that's in... The general theme of the newspaper, yes, there will be an editorial bias which is state controlled to a certain extent.
Every time I've had
on
a
a day-to-day
conversation
basis,
with a journalist, every time I've kind of had a conversation, this response that we used to get as an organisation or as an individual I used to get was, well, you're kind of passionate and you're kind of angry. And then the more I kind of read and the more I kind of developed myself, it was, well, it's beyond the scope of what we're trying to cover. It's too complex. We have a 5-minute segment or a 2-minute segment, and you have to kind of fit your entire expression within a sentence. Is that doable? Like
it is
bullet
doable.
point? Like
that is a skill. That is where the Sikh community or the Khalistan movement need to invest in a bit of professionality there. Play the game. It is a game.
Okay.
And you're the ones.
We're gonna.
Yeah.
On this question, we're going to take a couple of comments from the audience. I know Vizi's been waiting for a very long time. No, here, right at the front. And then we're going to go on to our next question.
Hi, my name is Dr Singh. I think we're talking about media, where media plays a very crucial role. So I'm going to talk about two incidents over here. 2014, 3rd anniversary of the 1984. That incident happened about 9:30 to 10 o'clock in the morning in India. I think
We're talking about the Amritsar.
6 o'clock the BBC covered that news over here. I was working in Terminal 5, so as soon as I opened my system, BBC, militant fight against, separatists fight against the Sikh hardliners. That was the news line. So they covered that. 2015, sacrilege of Dr Gurnam Singh Maharaj, all over Punjab. Continuously happened for nearly about 6 months. 2 Sikhs got shot dead as well. And the Sikhs went to protest in London. So one of the guy who was leading the protest, he said to the police, all we want is the media to cover 10 minutes so that we can tell the world what's happening in Punjab right now. The media didn't care. So what happened, the boys, what they did was they blocked the road. I don't know if it was a good decision, right decision or bad decision. The moment they blocked the road, all the cameras came out. It was like a Bollywood movie going on. So I don't understand. So media obviously played it. Someone is suppressing the media to cover their voice.
I think that's a good example of what I was saying. The media just goes after the story. There is no...
Can we say a Mirch Masala story, or can we say a suppression story when you've been told to cover that story, or you've been told not to cover that story?
In my 25 years as a journalist practicing in the UK, I have never been told what to write and not what to write by an editor or anybody else. But that's the UK.
Nick, at the back.
Thank you.
Maybe I can shed light on this in two ways. I used to be a journalist for the BBC Asian Network, and I'm also now an ex-journalist. I work on the other side, and I teach people in corporate business environments about how to handle the media. So we can have a moralistic conversation about whether the media is good, bad, whatever it is. The media exists. You can't change the way the media is. You can try and influence it, which is what I think I've heard on some of the panels, but you can't change the ethos of the media. So when you said, I think the media is evil, the media, the people asking the questions will ask provocative questions, they'll ask provoking questions. Some might be ignorant, some might not have all the knowledge that you require from the journalist, but remember, they Google know things. They've got a million other things that they've got to do in the day. It's not just the Khalistan story they've got to cover, they've got to cover so many other stories. So it's not just about you thinking that the media is evil, Nihal's evil. He's going to ask you those questions because those are the questions that other people are asking on Twitter, whatever, wherever. It's up to you to be able to handle that. And that's what I teach in the sense that, your 5-minute soundbite, your 3-minute soundbite. So let's articulate what you're going to say in that 2-3 minutes that you're in front of the media. What possibly can you say about Khalistan in 15-second soundbite? How are you going to get that across? So that's what we mean by strategy. You teach a strategy for that environment, for that mode of communication, whatever it is. Here you've got more time to articulate it. In the media, it is going to be sometimes a 15-second soundbite or a little quote or whatever. What are you going to say in that quote to get your message across? And that's what we mean by strategy and understanding the media. Look at Jeremy Paxman. Look at the questions he asks politicians. Are you going to get personally offended by it, or are you going to answer it in a way that you think you'll get your message across? If you take it personally, it's great for the media because we love a good argument on air, because it sells newspapers and it gets you viral and it does all that stuff. So that's when we say, know what you're getting yourself into and know how you're going to handle it when you're in front of the media.
So let's take one more comment from the audience, then we'll go to our next question. Do we have one more comment?
Can I ask a question, Phil?
No, I think we're going to need to move on to the next question just so we can fit everything. So last comment, very briefly, if you could, Vijay.
I think we are victims of chasing the narrative after it's already been set as a bump, as an organisation, as a community, whatever you want to call it. I think we need to come out of the mindset of rather following the narrative, is actually setting the narrative ourselves and allowing the media to come and chase us for that, the information that relates to that. I think too often it gets set somewhere else in a boardroom or in a, whatever. And
but the original question, sorry, Vijay, just to get your opinion on that, was that has internal conflict made it too difficult for that to actually happen?
I think our strings have been pulled in such a way that we ourselves don't know who we're looking at and if that person is Sajjal or not, and we start questioning each other a lot. in terms of people's motives, but I think we have to go back to basics, and I think Jagraj said it quite well in the video that was edited, just after his passing, which was we need to go back to Guru, and we need to go back to Ikhtias, and we need to start from there and build back from there. If we don't go from there, we've got nothing to build from.